start recording, because what I'll do is then I'll kind of edit a nice place where it comes in, and we kind of get chatting. But yeah, no, apologies for last time. Tiredness and that, and I was like, oh, I'm too tired. I couldn't even keep awake, and I think we were doing it at a similar time to now, which is
Mhm.
it's 10
Yeah,
p.m. isn't it for me? So in the what are you 5 hours behind?
I think so. It is 5 o'clock now.
Yeah, yeah, 5 hours. So I remember when I did the user group um, presentation over a year ago now, and I think it was midnight my time, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Round
because
about
we
that
don't
time.
start till 6:30. So yeah, it's another hour and a half from now. Yeah, it
Yeah,
was a
yeah, I
lightning.
enjoyed that. I hope the feedback was good, but I enjoyed doing it. It was my first kind of remote one
Oh,
via.
okay.
Yeah, I've normally, cause I mean, I'm not a presenter as such, and obviously we were going to be doing MMS. So for me, it was my first one via by myself via Skype or
Hmm.
Teams or whatever. So it was interesting. It was a good learning curve for me um, to get a feel for how to do it. And I've done a couple since, so yeah, it was good fun.
Yeah, it is a very different experience. You got to create that energy still, but you're staring at a monitor instead of people, and
Yes.
people love to stay on mute. So it's really hard to get them engaged. So I always say though, if people stay to the end, then that's a sign of a good presentation.
Yeah. Did they?
They did.
Oh, phew. Thank God for that. I think I know there was only two left by the time you'd finished. But are they promised more snacks and stuff as well? We've got pizzas coming.
Well, I always get more coming remotely now than I do coming in person. And of course, now we're not doing any in person. That's going to be several more months before we can even start to look at that. So
Yeah. So how long's the group been going then?
I got involved. It's been going for a very long time. Actually, someone pinged me the other day. It was almost like 10 years or something that she had started it. And I've never met her, but I got involved about 2 years ago. So one of the gentlemen who was working with it was his job had switched him to traveling a lot, and it's so very hard to do that. And I'm fortunate in that my job does not require me to travel, so I've kind of become the organizer, and he attends as he can. So it works out. We have about 4 or 5 of us who kind of collectively try to work on it here and there as our schedules permit. So
Yeah. I thought I didn't realize you'd taken over from some, or taken over the running. I thought it was relatively a new thing, but I'm completely wrong in that respect. So, um, and it's something that's always been run by Microsoft, is it?
oh no, we're not run by Microsoft. All they do is give us the ability to meet there. So what that means though is you have to have someone with a badge to be in charge of the room and getting people in and out. So, but no, it's not Microsoft run. I'd love to have people who aren't employed by Microsoft helping with the user group.
Right, right. We should get out some comms there then, yeah,
Hmm. Yeah.
and get people involved. I mean, is there a big community then of people
In the
who?
Charlotte, that we have not been seeing much activity just locally, but we were one of the first user groups to really kind of push the remote, and we had chatted with some other small user groups that were also having trouble getting people to come together. And so we had this concept of wouldn't it be neat that if we could have a joint meeting. So one of our organizers is out of Tampa, Florida, so he puts on a very small group in Tampa at the Microsoft office there, and we kind of coordinate the same time. So he'll get that his conference room online, and I'll get ours online, and we've talked about kind of exploring that further, but it's not gotten further than that at this point. But it's kind of this whole going to remote meetings just opens it up for everyone, no matter where they live, and provides that flexibility of time. Um, so I think that's been one of the pleasant outcomes of all of this COVID and activities where we're learning to use these remote tools and making it accessible for anyone, no matter where they live.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's you've seen a lot more activity and the ability now to sort of tap into these things, and um, that's encouraging. I mean, I've just sat on an Azure Fundamentals course today, actually, which I was surprised to see. I think it was a couple of months ago. I was thinking, oh, okay, is this something that's normally done? It's the first time I'd seen it, and I've spent, I think it's 5 hours today sat on that learning. And Microsoft give you a voucher then to use to take the exam.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I thought, why not? Perfect. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. So yeah, Julie Andreacola, thank
Correct.
you, yeah, thank you very much for participating in this uh, just a couple of jerks podcast. And I keep saying to people, it's not that we are jerks. So the idea behind the title was that we're kind of normalizing people, yeah, in the community. We're just saying we're regular people, struggling, succeeding, whatever in whatever we do. So thanks for coming on board.
Glad to be here.
And Julie, so I think people are gathering now that you work. If they don't know you, you work for Microsoft, yeah.
I do. I'm a senior premier field engineer, which means I help our some of our larger enterprise customers. They get a portion of my time, and I work directly with them for whatever it is that they need in the Windows 10 uh, area. A little bit into Configuration Manager as well, because you can't do Windows 10 without Configuration Manager. So, or Endpoint Manager. I need to get all my names right in tune. So,
Yes, yes, we got to keep up with the fast pace of it all now. It's the fact that it's renamed as well. It's you just got to add that to your list of things to keep up on in this service model, isn't it?
yep, yep. I got a post-it note with all my codes and all the different versions of Windows 10 and the different ways you can call it. It's just it's a challenge in itself.
Yeah, yeah. It's one of those things. I mean, I find that I enjoy doing it, and it's really stepped things up a level since Windows 10 came on board. But it also I find gives you a lot that you don't know compared to what you did do in the past. Do you find that?
Well, yeah, I mean it's so much more complex because we like to say, "Hey, go to the cloud. It's so much easier," and that's great, and it can be. However, in the meantime, you're managing both your typical on-prem infrastructure and the amount of security that we are all working with and dealing with has increased the complexity of that tenfold at least. And now we have to do cloud and figure out all of that networking on top of our infrastructure networking and get it all to work together and play nice. And then you have multiple products that everybody's got a new product and how it fits in the whole story of things. And so it gets a lot very fast, very complex.
Yeah, yeah. It definitely keeps us on our toes. I think the way to say it really, and try. I don't know. It's one of those things where if you're not keeping on your toes, if you're not dabbling and you're not playing, it's easy to fall behind, isn't it?
It's important just to always to love learning and to be able to know how you learn and learn quickly, learn kind of just in time. There's just it's so complex with security products, cloud plus you're still on prem and you're trying to figure out how to do the right thing in both areas and keep the lights on and keep your end users happy and being productive and all of that good stuff. And it's a challenge.
Definitely, definitely. So, what's your background, Julia? Is IT something that you wanted to do as a career then?
Well, I had a really interesting childhood. I say that I'm here. It's genetic that I'm in IT. My father's retired from IBM, and So we had computers very early on. In fact, before there was a personal computer, we had a very small device that he made out of parts, and it had 8 switches on it, and we would get these copies of Byte magazine. Now, I would not be doing this. This would be my brother and my father, but they would sit there and put in the binary codes, zeros and ones, and then you push the red buttons, and then you put your zeros and ones, push the red button, and we had a game of Lunar Lander that you could play. This was before Atari. I'm really going to be dating myself here. Um, before any of the home devices, and the kids would all come over, huddle around the screen, and it was essentially a very simple algorithm of gravity and weight, and you would just use these switches to do. I think the whole computer was 1K and had no storage until he swiped my mother's cassette player, and then we could record the games onto these cassettes, and that's how we would load this computer up. We would play the cassette tape, and it would load in the zeros and ones. So it was kind of crazy.
So that's no screen at all there, is it? Or
Well, we had a very small black and white television, again, that he had procured from the house, and had wired that up, and so that was the interface that we had. There's no internet, there's no other communications, no storage. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Primitive, but amazing. I suppose at the time, because you were kind of. It's interesting because I was watching a documentary about video games only last night on Amazon, and it talked about pre kind of Pong and Atari and things like that, and there was kind of a um, this thing called Space Wars, which I'm kind of sort of visualizing to be the same as what you were kind of doing.
Mm,
It was the first thing on a screen, and it was just a bit of light moving around, and they were controlling that, but they were like all crammed around this screen playing it because it was amazing to them. It was the first kind of video game that they would ever have seen or ever have interacted with.
yeah. And then I always remember this conversation at the dinner table one night. The Ataris had just come out, and my father was going on and on about how nobody should be buying these gaming consoles. It's ridiculous. They only do one thing. You can only play games. In a couple of years, everyone's going to have a personal computer. And that night, he and my brother went to Sears and apparently came home with said Atari system. So,
Did
but
that keep them entertained then? Did it?
yeah, but my brother was the one who was very much in love with technology and computers, and was the kid in the basement on the old modems, and I was outside. That was where my interest was. I had a horse, and we had lived out in the country, and so that's where I would spend my time. And so for me, that was my journey. My father always made sure I knew technology because it's way easier to type on the computer than it was on a typewriter, and so I always knew how to use them. And then he sent me to college with one, which was interesting because it was 1985, and I was majoring in forestry at Virginia Tech, and I know I'm the only forestry student with a computer. The engineers and the computer science majors, they had computers, but my father sent me off with a big old IBM. I forget what it's called, like size of a sewing machine, and a little amber screen, and yeah, and so it would break, of course, and so I would be calling at midnight in tears that whatever wasn't working, and so he expected me to fix it. He would help me troubleshoot it, and taught me that, and I learned some basic programming, and was using that for a summer job I had at the local regional park, and would take my own computer because the park didn't have any computers, and so I always had it, but it was always and it always still is a tool for me. I don't think it's like a major love of mine, but I love what it unlocks for people, and what you can do with it. Um,
That's
so
really interesting. I mean, I suppose back in the day, like you say, you're sort of dragging this thing round, and you'd be like one of the only people with them. at the time, except for real hobbyists, I suppose.
Well, this what by that time, of course, you know, there were personal computers everywhere, or quite a few, and now there weren't laptops, but yes, but all the engineering students and the computer science students for Virginia Tech were required to have one as a freshman. So they built it into the tuition or whatever if you didn't have your own. Um, and so you did see them, and of course we had a lot of computer labs, and but yeah, it was still early days, you know, floppies and all that good stuff, and punch cards, and I even had to take a Fortran course as part of my degree, so I did have that introduction to programming. I'm not sure how much that helped, if I could.
No, no.
But
I was gonna say to you, how did that go? Because I did Pascal programming, and I didn't have a clue. I really didn't have a clue. And my course was called technology management, which was a combination of business studies and technology. And but it was real mainframe stuff, and because my college years were 90 to 94, so the introduction of Windows happened whilst I was there, and then it suddenly meant something to me. I could understand it, but the old school stuff to me wasn't cutting it at all. It didn't really rock me at all, and yeah, Pascal programming. I remember just sitting there and thinking, "What is this all about?" And I've never been sort of the programming minded. Now I will use PowerShell and things like that now. It's very different, and I'll actually enjoy doing it. But to really sit down there tapping all the time, I thought this is not for me. So how did the Fortran stuff go? Was that again sort of forced upon you? It's part of the course, and
Well, sure. I mean, it wasn't something I necessarily would have picked, but it was part of the expected coursework. And no, it was good in that, you know, it teaches, you know, flow and logic, and that's an excellent skill no matter where you are. But I do remember, you know, trying to struggle to get it to run, and of course trying to find that one little mistake, and then the euphoria of finally when your program actually works. That was that I remember that. But no, that all that programming stuff, that my brother went in that direction, and so that was always his. He programmed from a very early age, and has always been the geek of the family. Um, and so he went through the developer route, and always was in computers. So I graduated and actually worked in forestry for Procter and Gamble for a couple of years. Actually, more than a couple. I was a forester for a couple, and then I moved into the manufacturing management, just because there were more opportunities for me there. And I learned very quickly what I liked about forestry. I could do recreationally and not have to be out there in the melting snow in the middle of nowhere, freezing. So.
right. I was going to say, there's a real shift, isn't there? Sort of, you've trained to do this, so this was going to be your career as
Mhm,
such, yeah.
yep.
So it was a passion for the outdoors, or just
Yeah, it's actually funny. When in high school, I thought, oh, it would be so great to just sit up there on these fire towers and watch for fires and just be there by myself. And I went to college and learned that no, I really like people and working with people, and was very involved in a lot of organizations and leadership and such like that. And so yeah, that part of forestry just wasn't there for me, but I was able to leverage that into, you know, just kind of my next steps in career. You know, got me into management, and all of those skills just translated. Um, and you know, can still do a little tree identification here and there, and wood identification. So there's some use of those old skills, but definitely the appreciation and the love for being outside, and park systems and balancing resources has always been something that's a love of mine. But you know, life just happens, and I had kids, and so after I had two kids, I stopped working and got to be a full time mom for about 7 years, which was awesome. Um, and But then life changes, of course, again, and I needed to be bringing in some income, and so my again, my father is always pushing me towards technology. He's like, at that time he was retired and subcontracting back to IBM. He says, go take a Visual Basic class, and then I'll subcontract out some of this programming work to you. And I'm like, okay, all right. So I did that and learned Visual Basic 6, I think it was. And we did, and I was able to do that while I was home with the kids, so it kind of worked out that way. And but I decided that the only way I could really be good at programming is while I was eating Cheetos, and the orange on the keyboard was just terrible. Those are cheese puffs snacks we have. Don't know
I
if
had
they
to
have
get
this.
some for my daughter when went over to the first summit. She wanted the hot Cheetos bringing back for a taste challenge. Yeah.
They're
Mm.
they're addicting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and then I needed to get full-time work, and so I started teaching at the local um, community college, teaching along with the Cisco programs. They had to learn all the Office products and Windows, so I was teaching that out of a curriculum, and that was going well, but still not enough hours. And so I got hired by the local school system in their IT department. And I was kind of excited. I thought, oh, I'll have my summers off, and then I learned no, it's a 12 months job.
Right. Oh
So,
no.
but yeah, I worked
Didn't
there
get the
for.
benefits then.
Yeah, I had benefits, good benefits, and a little bit of I got a pension and all that good stuff. But so I worked there for 10 years while my children were going through school, because I learned very quickly that working in education at your local school system, you know everything about that school system. There are no secrets.
Mm.
I knew I knew the best teachers. I knew the teachers that my children should not have. And when you save your guidance counselor's computer, and you then go in a couple months later to get your kid in a class that's already full, it just seems to magically work out and get my kid in whatever class I needed to get them in. So,
Brilliant. Brilliant. So it paid off. And
so
were they studious kids? Were they pretty cool at school?
yeah, we've had there's four kids between my husband now, and I have two steps and two of my own, and we've had three that have successfully been studious enough to get themselves through college and stuff, and then one who's still trying to figure out life. So, but all of them are adults. They're all on their own, off the payroll, as I like to say. And yeah, I've got two are in IT, and then one is a executive director of an assisted living facility.
Right.
So,
Right. The two in IT. That's not the granddad. Is your dad still alive? Is he?
no, yeah, he's still alive,
He's not
and
badgering them to be doing it, is he? Sort of feeding them info and that's great.
well, yeah, and well, and too, it's I I've come back into IT as in a career, and then of course my brother was always in IT. In fact, he worked for Microsoft, helped write the NT kernel, is one of his claim to fames, and the blue screen of death in Windows NT, that's his. Um, so yeah,
We
so
we know who to come to now when we get it. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, now he's doing Linux stuff in a startup, so it's
Right.
it's a yeah, just a different world in the developer. So my youngest son did go into development, so he's a .NET programmer, and then my daughter is in UX design and heavily getting very interested in SharePoint, and I was just telling her about the MVP program the other day. She was all excited about that, so we'll see what she does. So.
Is she actively involved then in community or just kind of wanting to kickstart in it?
She's not yet. She's been they had a what was it, a virtual 36 hours of M365, I think it was, or something recently, and she attended all these sessions. She kept messaging me about all this great stuff that she was learning. So I think she has the bug to be involved in community, and I would say she's a little bit of a mini me, and so that's in her skill set to be involved in networking and know people, and very driven in what she wants to do and learn. So I do see her continuing to grow in that area. So it'll be fun to watch. That's the fun of adult kids, is to see how they figure out life and what they choose on their own. So.
I think it's great. I think what I like is you've got this sort of three generations now of the family involved. Yeah.
Yeah, it actually goes back further than that.
Oh, right. Oh, crikey. Go on. I'm intrigued.
So my grandfather on my mother's side knew Wilbur Wright. Um,
Oh, right. Crikey.
he was a test pilot for the United States, and had one of the very first aeronautical engineering degrees, and so, uh, yeah, I mean, I don't have that connection to technology and flying and such like that, but he always like when he would buy a car, it would always have like every electronic gadget you can imagine. I'm just like, this is because he needs it to be like a cockpit. But yeah, so he was very accomplished. He has since passed, lived to over 100, which is pretty amazing for any test pilot, especially in back in the days when flew some of the very first helicopters um, and
Pretty
some of that.
pretty dangerous sort of career, really, isn't it?
Yeah, well, he was a test pilot for the FAA after the wars all finished and such, and so he would fly any aircraft that needed to go through the testing of what was certified by the FAA, Federal Aviation something, I don't know, government agency here in the United States that governs flights and airports and such. And so he's flown over 2,000 different types of aircraft because he was doing so many different, testing. So has a very different career than a lot of pilots because of just the nature of what he was doing, and worked on the Concorde project, and then worked around the world helping countries set up airports. So it was pretty interesting career that he had. Uh, so yeah, so tech is everywhere, right? Even before computers.
Oh gosh, yeah. And he wasn't someone who was interested in the NASA program at all, was he?
No, I mean, I think he was. No, I think it was more flight. In his later years, when I had memories of him, he was no longer flying as much. I mean, he would occasionally take us up in like a Cessna, a small aircraft, just a private one, but mostly he was advising and consulting on airport designs, and really had a specialty in pilot safety. And so, like, he helped with the Concorde, that supersonic jet, that whole tipping, how the front would tip down. Um, that was something that he insisted on because he said that you need to let your pilots have the ability to both have the visual landing as well as instrument, because if they hadn't done that, every landing of the Concorde would have been completely by instrument.
Yeah, they
Um,
won't be able to see out, would they? They won't be able to see the landing strip, I suppose. It's
yeah,
the nose
yeah,
is pointing right up. And
right.
what I mean, what a great aircraft that was. I mean, I've seen it once or twice, I think,
Mm-hmm.
flying over London back in the 90s.
Yep.
It's a fascinating
Yep.
little aeroplane.
Yes. So, but yeah. So that was the early tech.
Yeah, that was a
So.
good, great. Honestly, it's fascinating, really, hearing all these little stories um, coming out because it's great little insight. Um, and you're at Microsoft, so you're working at a big, a massive tech company, and how did coming into Microsoft happen then? How long have you been there?
I've been here, let's see, just over 3 years now. Um, Basically, I had my plan was to work with the school system till my children were out, and after that, I knew could make a lot more money outside in the commercial market than education, unfortunately. So once I hit that mark, I went into started off as a contractor because that's how most of us kind of get into those entry level into IT. And I was coming with a pretty good set of skills. Config man was definitely part of that, and application packaging was a little bit of that as well. And so and just a good knowledge of the Windows platform, as well as going through migrations. So I did some consulting for not consulting contracting for the big bank, and met some folks there, and then went into a consulting company and worked there for 3 years, and really liked that. But one of the things I had wanted to do was to see lots of different um, ways of the company set up their enterprise, right? So and so with consulting, the whole thing is, you're kind of in and out, and you get to see how some folks are doing it, and then you go somewhere else and you see how those folks are doing it, and you can just really learn a lot that way. But it turned out that the job that I kind of got into was I was a little bit not getting out of it. So things were going very well with that customer, and so in order to kind of break out of there, I needed to kind of move on, and so the opportunity uh, to see with Microsoft, I had was active in the local PowerShell user group, and so I knew folks there, and they had been telling me for a while that I needed to do that, and I had been hesitant because I kind of know some of the downsides, especially in the past of working for Microsoft. My husband has spent some time there. He worked there for 10 years. My brother was there for over 20 years, and there's reasons that they chose to move on. So I wasn't sure was ready to to do that because it's a very there's tons of smart people at Microsoft, and it can be very competitive. And in the old days, that was some of what was rewarded. Um, we've really changed the corporate culture. I've been impressed with that, and now it's really the best job I've ever had. So I'm really fortunate to be here and found the right niche for kind of my set of skills, and really enjoy it.
And you're there as a full timer then. You're not. It's not contracted anymore. You've
Correct.
moved over. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I came in as a full-time employee, which is a little unusual as well. So, but a lot of people do come in as contractors and then are able to get a full-time slot. So it just depends. The recruiting aspect of Microsoft is maddening. I can't figure it out. It's just maddening. It took 6 months, and finally, and I thought I'd at least get an interview because, a woman in technology, you think they'd at least talk to me. Maybe I wasn't have the skill set that they were looking for, but they at least have a conversation. I didn't get anywhere, and so finally, one of my PowerShell friends just said, "This is ridiculous," and took my resume and went up to his manager and said, "You need to hire this person." And then apparently the recruiters start to call. So that was my journey here. But yeah, it's if you've ever applied and you're frustrated with it, I don't know what to tell you. It's just it is. I don't know the secret. I can, I've recommended people who would be great and gotten nowhere. So I don't know. It's one of those things. It's a big company, and that's one of its disadvantages.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so I freelance and I've done a couple of stints with MCS, and the second time, I was in an interview which was basically, you're an MVP, you know what you're doing. When can you start? And I was like, really? Wow, gosh, completely, flummoxed by that and wasn't expecting that at all. I remember the first time it was a longer process. And that was just for a contract for
Mm.
a couple of months. Nothing huge, but it took a while. Um, and then when you get there, it's a great place to work. You can sort of tap into lots of things. Um, but the timesheet systems, not the timesheet systems. No, I can't remember what it's called now, but you have to obviously justify what you're doing, which is fair enough because there has to be then charged to the customer. But there's lots of systems that you're going through, and it can be very, very confusing from the start, particularly when you're only there for a short amount of time. But I suppose it's all kind of stuff you're used to now, isn't it? All that.
No, everybody hates it. Everyone complains about that. I don't understand how we have to have the most complex c- uh, timekeeping systems ever. And it takes me probably 15 minutes every day to enter my time. That's just
So you
ridiculous.
still have to do it, yeah,
Oh
yeah.
yes, every minute that needs to be tracked somewhere. And yeah, it's probably the biggest complaint amongst my peers. But there's a new system coming. It's supposed to fix all these problems, so we'll
Of
see.
course it will. Oh dear, yes, yes. That was one when I did sort of leave the particular roles. I was like, oh, thank God I don't have to do that anymore. I've forgotten the name of it now, the one I was using. Hopefully, it's the same one. But yeah, I mean, it's a great company to work for, and it's that sort of for you now. You'll be happy kind of sticking around and just going along with it, and
I think so, because if I get tired of what I'm doing now, there's so many other parts of the company that I could move into. It's kind of one of the advantages. I've worked for a lot of small companies. Like my consulting company was very small, and so there wasn't a whole lot of options. You kind of did what you did, and but with Microsoft, it's so large, and there's career planning's part of their people development. And so if you identify that there's another area that you want to work on, there is supporting structure to allow you to try to make that happen, and methods to do that in networking. So so yeah, I definitely see I'm going to be here for a while. Will I stay in the exact same job? I don't know. I've been moving around jobs, seems like every 3 or 4 years since I've left the school system. So I can't say for sure that I'll always be in this role, but I definitely like what Microsoft is doing. I liking what they're standing for. They've taken some very progressive stances, and have some really important things to say with diversity in the workforce, and not just women race type diversity, but all different types of diversity, and accessibility, which is a really intriguing. I love what Microsoft is doing to make technology accessible no matter what you're able to do physically, whether it's you know audio or a site or whatever it is, that they're building that into the products, and taking that into consideration of that you would be able to still fully participate with technology despite maybe not having all the audio or all the site available to you, and even language. I'd like to see us continue to do more with that. I think sometimes we are very much English focused, and we kind of miss out on the whole global aspect of technology. But it's coming. It's there. There's a lot of work that's being done in that area, and I think that that kind of really living out the goal. Satya has been a great leader that everybody really respects.
yeah, it's really changed massively, hasn't it, since he came on
That's
board?
that's what I understand. I've only been here for 3 years, but when I talk to those who've been here much longer than me, they're like, "Yeah, it really is changed," which is interesting because I've worked with other companies, and seen leaders come in, and this is the program we're going to do. We're going to change and be like X, Y, Z, and stuff doesn't really change. Kind of we rename stuff and maybe shuffle people around, but it's still the same old. And so this is kind of the first time I've really seen leadership actually accomplish the change that they set out to do. It's been a long time. It's not something that you can do quickly, um, but I've really enjoyed um, seeing that and being part of that. So that's been something that's been important to me.
Yeah, and from speaking to other people who are at Microsoft, they seem to handle the whole COVID-19 situation very well as well, as in people were quickly made remote and given support and things like that. So, were you sort of locked down around February time? Were you March, February?
March, yeah, but I've been remote. I support all my customers remotely. I I never seem to get. I even lost my airline status because I don't travel. Um, so it's and yeah, I've been working from home. We have an office, but it's about a 45-minute drive for me in traffic. So that's time I can use for other things. So I've chosen to have a home office, and so yeah, so for COVID that didn't change my working area certainly impacted my ability to work because that's a lot of stress that came with all of that, especially in the beginning when we didn't really have an idea of what was going to happen. And of course, a lot of companies scrambling to get their workforces where they needed to be with the tools that they needed to do. But yeah, for us on the Microsoft services side, so your all the support and consulting and Premier such. Yeah, we were already kind of there working from home. So it wasn't as a big a transition for our part. I think the engineering part of Microsoft, it was a bigger transition because in the Redmond area, they are very much all coming into the office and working together. But services has been working, collaborating remotely for years. So
So apart from not being able to go out to a degree,
right.
it's not really changed your day to day thing.
No.
You've got the home office area. Are you quite disciplined in? Okay, this is when I'm starting. This is where I stop. Because it's quite easy to bleed, isn't it, into doing more work because you're at home and you can kind of do an extra hour here or whatever.
Yeah, I'm pretty good. I guess I'm to the point in my career. I understand if you want work-life balance, you just have to leave things undone. You can't finish it all. It's not going to happen if you want work-life balance. The secret to doing it is to say, "Hey, I'm done," and be done for the day. I know some of my peers will kind of break off early and then come back in the evening and work, and I can't seem to get into that rhythm. I'm a start in the morning and just heads down and work until I'm done in the evening. So I need to get better at that. I think that's something that the COVID did show me that when I had all that stress, I wasn't taking very good care of myself as far as like not getting out of my chair all day long.
Mm,
um, so that's something that I still have to work on and be better disciplined in that aspect. But as far as like working 14-hour days or something, 12-hour days, I rarely do that.
right. So when you were saying that the stressful scenario, was that just lots of things happening at once, and you're kind of glued to the screen trying to help out, or?
Yeah, just, consuming way too much media probably. And, my husband's high risk, my parents are high risk. So, I felt the burden to make sure that I was, protecting them and doing all the errands and such and things like that. So probably internalized, hindsight's 2020, right? I mean, it looked kind of bad with some of what we were seeing initially and, what Italy had experienced and such. And, so we're fortunate that here in North Carolina, where I live, we have not been severely impacted, not like in New York City or even Seattle or San Francisco. Um, so yeah, so we've been, suburbia, so there's a little bit less of an impact. But didn't know that going in, right? Wasn't quite sure how that was all gonna shake out, and kids in different locations and feeling the stress of that as well. So, but yeah, I just got to get better at self care.
Well, it's one of those things because ultimately, you could think in that way initially, or it could just happen further down the line. I mean, I've recently been thinking, well, this is ongoing now, isn't it? And
Mm.
you can't think, the simple things in life, cinema visits or stuff like that. How is that going to happen, and how are things going to change? And you start thinking about the kids. I mean, I've got 4 kids myself, and my youngest due to become a teenager in about an hour and 10 minutes.
Good luck.
Great, great. um, she's staying up for that as well, and it's what's it going to be like for them? And so these things play on your mind. I mean, yes, the weekend I went to see my mum. Who's up in the north of England, so it's a good couple of 100-mile drive because we hadn't been allowed to travel
Mm.
anything like that for the last 3 months, and seeing her for the first time in ages was fantastic. And but it was kind of, we'll sit in the garden, will stay apart, and all these sort of things, putting
Mm,
all the social distancing in place. And then you start thinking about this and thinking, this is terrible, really, that we have to go through this, but this is the new normal, isn't it? And but for how long? And this is just an unknown at the minute.
yeah.
Um, and it's coping with that. So, it could go either way, really, on those kind of internal thoughts. You start thinking about it more over time, and things. So in North Carolina, then, like you say, it's not really had the outbreak of New York or Seattle, but at the moment, for you, how what are the restrictions, and how are you allowed to travel around? Is it quite is it eased up a little bit?
So we are officially in what we call phase two. And what that got us was we were always a shelter in place. We were never 100% restricted. They were saying everyone stay home unless you're an essential worker. So there was still quite a bit of movement. I mean, uh, uh, the schools have all been closed and they're closed for the remainder of the year, and the remote learning is been put on these parents, and I feel for that. That's so very difficult to balance, work and education of your kids at the same time when you were not planning on doing such a thing. um, but now in phase two, the restaurants are now able to have people up to 50% and outdoor dining. Bars are still officially closed, but if you're a brewery or distillery or winery, they've said that that's going to be okay. And then the big
So you
one.
can sell from that. You can sell takeaways from those kind of
Yes,
locations. Yeah, yeah.
we've always had the takeout and delivery and such has been from the get go. So, but now they can open their dining rooms, and it's been interesting to see. They've been kind of not every restaurant rushed to do that. They're just that they have restrictions. They got to wear masks and have they can't do buffets or anything like that. So they're trying to kind of figure that out as restaurant owners as well. How did they handle, people can't wait in the lobby of the restaurant. They have to wait in their cars, and we text them. And so a lot of people have to kind of refigure that out. So it's not every restaurant open the first weekend for sure. Um, so a few more keep opening here and there. I've not done that. I've kind of uh, not done kind of kept with the whole takeout thing and tried to support the businesses that way. I don't know, sitting in a restaurant where you're surrounded by people with masks doesn't sound particularly fun yet. So I'm not signing up for that at this point.
No, I've just watched some footage this evening, actually, of McDonald's is starting to open again in the UK for takeout, and this particular place, um, the queue was horrific. Seriously, they had the police out to coordinate it all because they were just down the road. It was unbelievable, and I thought, really, you're really that desperate for a McDonald's that you're willing to do this? But obviously, some people are. It's interesting. But so we go to a local fish and chip shop um, in Greenwich, and where we are, and it's traditional British fish and chips, yeah. And at the minute, we've got this glorious weather. We're in the mid 20s Celsius, so we're at 80 odd Fahrenheit, and we've got fantastic sunshine. At the minute, we can ring through and we can order our food and go down there, and it's lovely to stand out and wait until you're called in. Your number's called. But in a few months' time, when it started, when the rain's coming back, I'm not too sure how that's going to work. We may have to sit in cars and things, but at the minute it's working well.
hmm
Um, who knows? But yeah, I couldn't have done that McDonald's thing. That's just absolutely crazy.
it has been interesting because we have lots of fast food here, and it's been interesting to see which fast foods their drive-throughs have been packed the whole time, and even this one Japanese hibachi place has a drive-through, and it's always wrapped around the building every time I go by. So I'm like, well, they're not suffering from their business. they always have a crowd. So yeah, it's been interesting to see some of the restaurants kind of be innovative and bring in like kind of grocery orders and such. So it's been interesting to kind of watch all that evolve. But no, and the hair salons and nail salons are now open, so that's kind of a big deal. Still only, I think they are restricted on capacity, and you have to wear a mask. So, and they're so booked, you know.
I can imagine. Yeah,
So,
yeah. I'm
so yeah,
now.
I'm on the list.
Um, oh, it's it's student days almost with me, except grey in now. It's sort of lengthwise. We've got at least another 4 weeks to go before they open up, and yeah, it's gonna be there's gonna be quite a queue there for sure. It's
Yeah,
I can't wait. Yeah, I can't do the. Luckily, I can. Like my brother-in-law lives with us, and he has the shaved off completely. I've been doing that in the garden. I'm not doing that. So but I sometimes I look at it and I go, oh God, I need to do something. But yeah, so we'll get there with that, and it's again, yeah, again, it's the change, isn't it, of how you go in there and the sort of cleaning down, I suppose, that they have to do afterwards, in between each person. Yeah,
it
yeah.
adds a lot of time.
Mm. So North Carolina, then, Julie. I mean, I've only been to the States twice, both times to uh, Redmond, Bellevue. Um, if I'm coming to North Carolina, what delights would be there for me? So you're near Charlotte, aren't you? Like, I think you said you're
Correct.
about 40 minutes or so away. Now, my wife has a friend who um, lived here. She worked with him, and he's from the States, and he's moved back, and he's in North Carolina. He's in Chapel Hill.
Hmm.
Um, so if I was to come over, what would I be? What would I do in North Carolina? What's the delights for the
Well,
tourist?
I would say it's kind of a fun state in that we've got beaches on one side and mountains on the other, and so it's about 3 hour drive from the Charlotte area to either. So like one weekend we're like 2 weekends ago we went and saw our kids at the beach. They live outside the Wilmington, North Carolina, and the beach there, so we visited them, and then the past weekend we have a small camper, and we took that up into the mountains and went camping in the mountains. So that's one of the things that I really like about this location. As far as like Charlotte proper, I mean, we're the home of NASCAR. If you've ever seen a
Okay.
NASCAR race.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I
Definitely.
have not been to one of the big ones. I've been to some of the smaller ones where you don't have to sit for all day long to watch these cars go around. And it's pretty interesting. There's a lot of tech in it. Um, it's pretty scientific at this point. What they do to tune those cars and maximize and plan the whole pit stop thing is just a whole strategy thing. It's very fascinating when you kind of get into that. So I'm not a huge I don't I, that's not something I allot time for, but I like the culture surrounding it. It's just fun to go and people watch and watch people enjoy the sport, and it's usually very accessible. Like you can get in to see the cars and the drivers, and if that's what you want to do, and it's just one great big party along with it. So it's great people watching. So.
Is NASCAR? I do know NASCAR. I'm not a fan of motorsports. I used to be into Formula One back in the 90s.
Hmm.
Um, and I've been to there's a place called Brands Hatch, which is sort of 20 miles away from here, which is a famous UK circuit. So I went to see some racing there, and it was interesting to watch it. Um, but the NASCAR is that the one where do they drive forever? Does
They
it go
do.
on for
They
hours and hours and hours?
Well, yeah, it can be. They have different lengths of races, so it'll be like a couple 100 miles or 500 miles. So some of the like 500-mile ones, especially if they have wrecks, then it makes it take longer because then they got to clean all the track and hose it all down and dry it all off. And uh, but every track is a little bit different. There's a few that are road courses where they have lots of turns, and then the majority of them are just kind of the oval where you just go around
Oh, yes.
and keep turning left.
I was gonna say, is do they have that, just the circular tracks? And yeah.
mhm.
How
Yeah, and
how
that's
many
what we have in.
how many 100 miles would they race on that for then? Like, a couple of 100 miles just turning left all the time?
Yeah, because they go around, and that's where the whole pitting thing, I guess, comes into play. Yeah, you're getting way outside my expertise here, but
Yeah. See, I know
because
nothing about it as well.
because when you come off to change your tires and get new fuel and whatever else they got to do, you aren't going around in circles anymore. So it's all about when you choose to come off the track and who's where, and when you come back on, your counter starts again. So you're trying to strategize the best time to do that where you're not impacted as much. So
Yeah. That's
we could
that's as
reach
much
the
as
end of
I
my
know, man.
NASCAR knowledge
Yeah.
there,
Yeah.
yeah, that's one thing, and of course we got good food, and we're into the kind of the pork barbecue is the Carolina thing. Have a couple different variations of that. Um, so we're all about the smoking the meats, and then we have something called pimento cheese, which is an interesting southern thing. Have you had that? Where shredded cheese and mayonnaise essentially, and a few pimentos in there, but
Tasty?
it is. I mean, it can vary. I like the ones that aren't a whole lot of mayonnaise. But yeah, everyone has their own kind of little spin on it. But uh, yeah, and then shrimp and grits and a lot of this typical Southern food, biscuits and such like that, fried chicken. That all is done very well around these parts. So
Cool. Now talking about food, now I did a slight bit of research before, and I came across something quite fascinating. I found anyway. You know what I'm talking
you're
about?
talking about my unusual hobby.
Yeah, which involves gingerbread.
It does. It does. So, yes, my 15 minutes of fame was in 2018. My husband and I uh, did the National Gingerbread House competition, and we won. And did a little Food Network show along the way, and such like that. So,
So
um,
was that the first time you'd entered?
No, not the first time we had entered. We've been entering our local contest for about 7 years, and every year kind of getting better and better at it. We do it together, which is kind of a unique. There's not too many teams that do this, like especially husband and wife teams, because if you can imagine a project that can be very fragile that has to be done on a specific timeline.
With a husband and wife doing it together? Could be
Oh,
chaos,
eh,
disastrous.
the first years, I think we were ready for counseling after each time, because we just do it the one time a year. So we start usually 2 or 3 months ahead of time, and just start constructing and building. But at one point, we finally figured out that we needed to each stay in our lanes. So there's things that he does really well, and there's things that I do really well. And we made the rule that what 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 he's in charge of is things like structure and putting the building the building the buildings and baking. He actually does the baking of the gingerbread. I make gingerbread, the dough and such, and then do all of the kind of detail work and colors and kind of the story behind whatever that piece is. So kind of more on a little bit on the creative side, where he likes to think of himself as a gingerbread engineer, and so and that's what won our the competition for us, because we have a laser, an industrial laser like you would engrave wood and such with, and we used that to. He developed a technique and a way to cut gingerbread with that, so it allowed us to be very very precise and clean. And yeah, so if you are so inclined, you can Google, Julie and Michael Andreacola, and our piece will pop up there for you, from 2018. Um,
Well, yeah, no, I watched a YouTube video of your husband flattening out the gingerbread and
uh,
making it perfect.
yep.
See, like I say, I don't prep anything, but I do 5 minutes, quick Google, and I saw this. Oh, this is really interesting, actually, because I'd spent 10, 15 minutes chatting to Mike Marable about making bread, and I thought
Mhm.
this is brilliant because you know, I love stuff like this. It's fascinating, and he was, you know, showing you how to do it. It's flipping the trays around and all this, and sort of rolling it out,
Mhm.
saying that it's got to be precise thickness
Yeah.
across the whole of the gingerbread, so that you can, when you do the lasering,
Right.
laser printing or whatever you call it, it works. So obviously, if it's warped or whatever, it wouldn't cut it right. Or
Well, yeah, you'll get variation, and it needs to just be really dense. When we do construction grade gingerbread, it tastes good, but what we do to it is we end up baking it so long and making and letting it dry out, so that there's no moisture, and that allows these structures to stand for extended periods of time. So because we'll start like the 2018, well, the past 2 years we've started in the summertime, and baking gingerbread and putting that piece together, and that goes on display in November and then comes off display in January. So that's a long time to stay together. So it's not like the kits that people buy, because well, that gingerbread's pretty hard a lot of times if it's older. If the kit's been in inventory for a while. But if you're baking gingerbread that tastes good, or it's a cookie recipe, you'll have trouble keeping that structure not from caving in and such like that. So there's all sorts of different methods, and there's kind of a group of, we call ourselves Ginger Friends. We have a little Facebook group because that's how we all, around the world, talk to each other and share tips and tricks, and kind of learn from each other, because it's a really a kind of experimenting. It's a little bit like dollhouse making, miniatures, and a little bit of baking and sugar craft. But yeah, it's a fun hobby. We've already started on our piece for this year. Trying to get ahead of things and make gingerbread and all that good stuff. Uh, but
oh, it's
yeah,
cool. I mean, I've done it once and it was terrible. It caved in. But that, so there's a real skill involved. But like you say, making it stay like that for X amount of time.
right. Yeah. The number one piece of advice I tell people: if you're doing it at home, bake your pieces, decorate them, wait one day before assembling it into the house. It's so much easier to decorate things when they're flat and you're not fighting gravity, and your piece will come out much better. So even your home kits, just plan on taking 2 days to let that icing set up, and it'll be a world of difference.
Cool. And the community then, you're saying they're all good, they're all friendly. It's not like, is it competitive? Are they all? It's not like the ice skating world where they're all trying to knock each other off and all that. They're all
No,
pretty good bunch.
it is, and that's one of the things that people have commented about, who've kind of started with this hobby and this group, about how helpful people are. Every once in a while you'll have someone who might be a little bit more competitive, but and not wanting to share. But I can't even think of someone off the top of my head. Everyone is willing to share their recipes and their experiences, and help people. So it's kind of a little bit unique, at least in, I've heard. I don't do cakes. I'm not a cake decorator, but I understand some of those competitions can be very competitive and not as sharing with each other. But again, I don't know. I'm not in that community. I certainly learn and appreciate some of the things that they do, but the cookie is a little bit different than a cake, so we have to kind of use some different techniques. So
You're blessed to be in the gingerbread community and the config manager community, because that's similar. We talked about this in the podcast before. How on the Twitter it's a good bunch of people that just sharing ideas, sharing thoughts, and all that. And there's not a lot of bad vibes goes on in it. So it seems like you've got that in the gingerbread world as well.
yeah, that's the kinds of things that I want to gravitate to. So I don't have any interest in being in a non-collaborative environment.
Mm. So the competition that you won then. So you said the Food Network.
Yeah, so there's a show. It's kind of more of a documentary style thing. I don't think it's up on the internet right now, but it's called Gingerbread Giants, and they did it for 2 years, and they've picked 5 or 6 competitors that were creating things for the national competition and kind of followed along in the process. Because in the gingerbread house competition, you come with your piece already made. It's not like what you see on the Food Network where they're trying to make it really fast and they only have a certain amount of time. Um, and there is some gingerbread competitions. They do have one show on the Food Network where they are on a time constraint, and I've had some friends do that. But it's very difficult. It's just gingerbread. Remember what I said? You need to let it set overnight, and so it's not like the cake world where you can kind of go very quickly. So, um, yeah, so Gingerbread Giants, they filmed us and came to our home and spent a whole day filming us doing various things and then at the competition, they filmed the judges judging and then also the award thing. So we show up there a little bit in that program. So that was a lot of fun.
So did they kind of do it like American Idol style? Did they, with sort of announcing the winners, and they kind of kept you, you know, on the edge until you found out?
Yeah, we were really surprised, actually, because our piece was very different from the others. If you look at the National Gingerbread Competition pieces, they're all amazing. It's really to win it, it's I mean, there's a couple, obviously we have criteria that we're working against, but everybody's so very good at it. I don't know how these judges even manage sometimes. It's just the finest little details. In fact, for us, the difference between us winning and coming in second was a clock that my husband had made with gears, and he spent hours trying to make it work. And it wasn't until about the fourth try that it actually, if you turned the gears, that the hands on the clock actually moved. And that was the difference because we had that ability to move. That was the difference between us and second place. Uh, so just very small little details like that uh, are really significant at that type of a competition. So.
Well, I mean, I saw the picture and it looks amazing.
Mm.
You know, the actual finished product, and I'm gonna have to take another close look at it because I was very frantically like skimming through, looking at things, and saw this. I thought this is fantastic. I need to know more about this. But so you're already planning. You're planning this one for the end of the year. You say so. This will be around
Yes.
November time when
Mhm.
it'll be complete. Is that right?
Yeah, yep, that's the goal. Although we've already, because we competed last year too and did not place at all. We tried to do something completely different and totally different from anything we'd ever done before, really conceptual and abstract. It didn't work out. Uh, so we
But you
learned
gave it a go.
we need to play to our strengths, and that was not our strength. Um, so yeah. But my husband's been very adamant that if it's not right, he's not entering it. So we'll see because we've not been as diligent on it with just kind of all the different stresses of life and such. So we'll see what we end up with, but there's a good chance we'll have a pretty fantastic piece this year. So.
And is it all kind of top secret? You're not allowed to say what you're working on, kind of thing, as well.
I do have a Facebook group where I will start a private one where I have my fans, friends and family who, are look forward to what we create every year and are interested in how we create it, not just the finished thing. So I will post in there, but yeah, we don't tell the other competitors what we're doing. So if someone wanted to know, I would tell them as long as they were not going to be competing in the contest.
Exactly, exactly. And is it totally edible then at the end? Then
It
you
is.
can just
We're not
break it
allowed.
apart and
Yep. This competition, you're not allowed to have any inside structures, and no wood, no wrappers on candies, no foam, no PVC pipe or anything like that. So it has to be 100% edible, and it also has to be small. I consider it small. Everyone loves to send me pictures of these huge, elaborate things and saying, you should make this, but we're restricted to a 24-inch cube. Um, so big old castles and stuff, once you get that down to proper scale, would be very tiny, and
Yeah.
not nearly as interesting. So that's one of our challenges too, is really thinking through the scale and how that's going to present artistically.
And when you get to the point of eating it, are you kind of like, oh, should I? I love it so much. You've nurtured this thing for months, haven't you? It's like, I'll just get a hammer to it, smash. What- what's
The,
the method? Is it just,
the,
or
the,
do you hand it out to people, or
Well, it's really not edible. You could break a tooth by the time
oh, is
we
it
collect it
right?
in
Okay.
January. Um,
God,
yeah, we typically we don't have enough room to save these pieces. They are very, very fragile. In fact, when we took our piece out, because we won in 2018, it stayed on display for an entire year in this little turning thing. Uh,
brilliant.
and as soon as we went to move it out, it started crumbling, or some of the pieces started crumbling and breaking. It just gets that fragile. It's sugar. It's all made out of sugars and gingerbread cookies. So yeah. So we tend to save certain pieces off of it that may be kind of cool to keep. So I have certain elements off of that piece and a lot of our previous pieces, but no, it's pretty much pictures. And then yeah, we different ways of disposal. We've tried fireworks, sledgehammers, and fireworks. It's harder than that, man. I couldn't even get one to explode. So um, I haven't tried tannerite yet. That's been and that probably would work really well. That's in some sort of flaming shooting thing. That's why I haven't tried it.
Well,
But
it sounds as much fun as, as making it. It's not going to
yeah,
destroy the thing.
we last year, was it last year or the year before, we had a couple pieces that we had collected. Some of our friends, we had one friend specifically who was like, "Take my piece and I want you to blow it up and film it." And so, so we did that. We had a lot of people willing to help try to make that happen. So yeah, it ended up having to be a big old bonfire to finally consume it. So
Brilliant. And when you're sort of starting off on it at the beginning, are you kind of, making bits and oh, that's not perfect. We're not going to use that. We'll just eat that. We'll have that.
yeah, well, what yeah, I mean scraps and such. We We definitely, we always do a pattern where we'll construct our structures out of foam core board ahead of time, and that's really important in order to have a good piece, because that way you know where you're going to have fit issues and such, and that becomes the pattern then for your pieces. But yeah, I do a lot of the sculpting of figures and stuff, and the modeling chocolate and the fondant that we use. You gotta there's parts of that that get scrapped, and that's you just kind of keeps you fueled to keep on going. So but yeah, that a lot of the other things other than the gingerbread baked, so it's extremely hard, are very tasty. So
Yeah, yeah.
uh,
You can tell with the way I'm asking questions, I'd just be eating it all the time. So to try a bit here and there. Why not? I'm like that when I
absolutely.
bake bread. I'm kind of like, as soon as I bake bread, I just take a slice off now.
Oh yeah,
So I have it
absolutely.
as soon as possible. Well, Julie, it's been a real treat chatting to you today, and I didn't even get to talk to you about MMS. I'm gonna
I know,
pick.
the big mystery. Will we have it? We don't know.
Well, and I was going to be presenting with you, and I'm not coming now,
I
and
know. Well,
gutted,
there's.
gutted, because we had quite an audience signed up, hadn't we? At that, but I don't know if we're allowed to say that actually.
Oh,
But
I hadn't noticed. So,
well, compared to all the other presentations I was doing, the numbers were stacking up very, very well.
well, it's such a cool topic. I mean, troubleshooting failed in-place upgrades and trying to decipher a Windows setup log, because config man people, we haven't had to do that until Windows 10 came along.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And yeah, it's really interesting that, and I was looking forward to it. And I mean, we can't even get over to your country now anyway. We're banned.
Yeah.
So I don't know. As far as I'm aware, it's still on for July.
Yep.
I don't know anything beyond that, but I can't go, and I think a few other people have had to pull out as well.
Yeah.
But who knows? Maybe next year. Who knows what's happening? As we say, we kind of we take it as it comes, really, with
Right.
regards to COVID. Um, but yeah, no, it's I would have liked to have chatted to you about your presenting and things like that, but we've reached the end of the program, the show,
They'll
sorry,
just
or
have
whatever
to
we call
come
it.
to the conference whenever
Yeah,
they manage to have it.
exactly, exactly. So yeah, thanks ever so much for taking part, and hopefully I'll get to meet you at an MMS or some event at some point in the future.
Absolutely.
Be great. And if you want another remote presentation session at some point this year, let me know. I'm happy to do another one for you.
Ah, that would be awesome. That would be
Don't know
great.
on what, but anything, I don't mind. But yeah, thanks a lot, and take care.
Take care.